And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a day it was. Lots and lots to get to. I want to start off with something I didn't have a chance to really get into yesterday, and the fact that I'm happy to see that Joe Biden has named who will be the next labor secretary, Boston Mayor Marty Walsh. Guy's got an incredible backstory. Started off as a working guy working as a laborer, became the laborers president, went on to be a state representative in Massachusetts, and eventually became mayor of Boston. Now an actual card-carrying union guy who's carried a jelly bucket to work will be the labor secretary, and I think that is fantastic, and it's about time. Much better, got to tell you, much better than having a corporate lawyer like Eugene Scalia, who is currently our labor secretary. I have high hopes for Marty Walsh going forward. I really do, and I'm hopeful that right now, while we deal with all of the other problems and there are tons of them, that we start looking towards the future. And Joe Biden, in his speech talking about Marty Walsh, had a couple of things that I thought were really important to point out. He said that his team will help us emerge from the most inequitable economic and jobs crisis in modern history by building an economy where every American is in on the deal. See, this is something that we haven't had. We've had to give all the rich people all the money, and maybe some of it will trickle down to you. Talking about how we're going to make sure everybody gets ahead, everybody does better. I think that's incredibly important. And the line that got me, he said, of his economic team, they share my belief that the middle class built this country and that unions built the middle class. When Joe Biden says that, I absolutely believe him. And what we need to be doing if we're going to rebuild the middle class, if we're going to have a prosperous working class once again, we're going to need to have strong labor unions. We're going to have to have people who are going to be able to sit down at the bargaining table and hammer out good wages, benefits, good working conditions, and a future opportunity for everyone. So I wanted to start off with that because that's really good stuff. That's what the future is going to be. January 20th at noon, that's where we're heading. That's the direction that I will be spending the focus of my time. But for right now, Donald Trump has to go. The reality is, I'm still angry that Pelosi hasn't put the articles of impeachment out already. I guess Monday they're coming. I guess this is Donald, go to Camp David, think about it and resign, as opposed to being impeached again. He would only be the first president ever to be impeached twice. So going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, I've always said that there's no way it's possible that Trump is going to resign. I've said that from the beginning. The first time someone uttered it to me, I said, there's no way. Because he still had his loyal fan base. He was still high on the mountain. Every social media platform has banned him with the exception of Parler. And Parler has been banned by Google. This is one of those moments where he's not riding high anymore. And to be honest, his concession speech the other day has caught the ire of the crazy crowd who are absolutely incensed. It's amazing to watch the crazy Chans and all of the right-wing, the fringe folks who are turning on Trump and well, this is predictable. And I've been saying this for a while. When they turn on him and when the Republican Party is done with him, when the corporatists are done with him, it'll be interesting to see the fall. Because look, in this country, we love to see people rise and then, meteoric falls. This, a meteoric fall in a matter of days. In a matter of days. You even have all of these evangelical pastors who have either been silent during the Trump years or have been, out there enabling and pushing and because, he was God's choice, remember? Remember, God personally chose Donald Trump. It's interesting watching them now trying to regain their soul. It's interesting now trying to watch them. Well, this is too far. They've been dancing with this devil for a long time. You go back to the Christian Coalition of the 80s. They've been dancing with this devil for a long time. And now it's out of control. It is raging out of control, and it's a monster that they created. It's a monster that they justified. And now they're going to have to, well, bear the responsibility for it. And I give none of them. I know there are some people who are saying, well, they've come around. They've realized the errors of their ways. No. You had that opportunity numerous times. We've been talking about this stuff for years. Every time Trump went on this rage about, smack the out of somebody or throw them out of the room with no coat or, we'll show them, we're not going to be so nice. Every time one of those statements came out, they didn't say anything. And now it's, well, it's an abomination. It's horrible. And it's all Trump's fault. And the incredible thing, the guy who got elected to the legislature in West Virginia, and I love this story, who was inside the Capitol and live streamed himself going in. There's a Rhodes Scholar. Evidently, they went to his house in West Virginia and they arrested him, and Grandma was not happy. Grandma went out evidently with a coat and threw it over the camera. And when they asked her, why? What? She said, he's a good boy. He's a good guy. He's a good man. And then turned it. This is Donald Trump's fault. Interesting how that personal responsibility thing doesn't apply, and get ready for it. Because I guess there's been something like 100 people already arrested. And they're going to get the rest of them. As I understand, in Ohio and Tennessee, they're going after legislators. Here in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, I'd keep an eye out in the window for some cars pulling up. They're going to go get him. And you know what the number one defense is going to be? It's not hard to figure out. It's Donald Trump's fault. It's coming. And it's kind of some bit of poetic justice because he caused all this. He's the one who wanted this. And I've been saying this for 4 years. He wants violence in the street. I've been saying it for 4 years. And I'll tell you, I take no joy in having been correct. But there's this moment. And look, there's going to have to be not just words, not just, oh, I'm sorry. I got caught up in the moment. Oh, I don't know what I was thinking. Oh, I was just following along. No, that's not enough. If we've learned from the past, that's not enough. We've got jail cells, lots of them. We should be filling them up. We should be fining every person involved in this all the way up the food chain. And for me, it's follow the money at this moment, because I guarantee you all of this goes to the big money donors. All of this goes to these organizations that have been funding these AstroTurf groups all across the country. Our billionaire class, the one we've been giving all these tax breaks to so that they could create jobs. And all they've done is figured out how to use that money that we've given them in massive, massive tax breaks. Understand the top marginal tax rate in this country at one point was 92% on every dollar over $1.6 million in today's bucks. Reagan dropped that all the way down to 28%. Clinton jacked it up a little bit, and we got Trump, who dropped it down again. They're flush with cash. They have so much money, they don't know what to do with it other than cause trouble and chaos. And this is what got us to this moment. It is all of that right-wing money that's fueled right-wing talk radio, and every one of these think tanks of the state policy network, like the Commonwealth Foundation here in Pennsylvania, every one of these groups have to be investigated for their part in this, because they all stoked the flames. They all got people all riled up. They're the ones who put the words in their minds so that they could spew it out their mouths. They are just as responsible and need to be held accountable, all the way up to the moneyed interests who funded this stuff. We're not going to solve this. This isn't going to go away until you starve off the cash flow. This is not going to end unless you hold those accountable with the checkbooks. Sure, we're going to go after these idiots. You're going to get the guy who took a leak on Pelosi's desk. You're going to get the idiot who kill the media or do away with the media on the door. We're going to get the guy who took the picture, sitting in the chairs. We're going to get those people. They're going to go to jail. But it cannot end there. It has to go beyond. It has to go further. It has to go to the Doug Mastrianos who were out there cheerleading. Oh, yeah, you go on in there, you go. To the billionaires who funded these people. That's the only way we stop this right-wing insanity. We cannot have a terrorist organization in this country participating in our politics. Can't have it. And I've been saying this since the Tea Party. Everyone says, oh, well, the Tea Party was a spontaneous. No, it wasn't. There was anger, lots of it. But it was well funded. It was well organized. It was well orchestrated. They were funding tons of these groups. The billionaire cash was flowing. And for the people who say, well, we didn't realize it could be violent. Oh, my goodness gracious. Who could have possibly known? Who could have known it would have been violent? Oh, golly gee whiz. Who could have imagined? Well, everybody, did you not pay attention to 2010 and 11? Did you not see these tea-twizzling morons running around pretending with their trifold hats that they're reenacting the revolution? And the day of the insurrection here in our country, there was a congresswoman from Colorado who tweeted out, today is 1776. In that world, now, for you and me, you go, well, today's 17. No, it's not. It's 2021. In that world, that's dog whistle. That's it. Them's fighting words. That's get the guns loaded, locked and loaded, and ready to bear. Now they have to be held accountable. And since Pence is a coward, and all of the people in Trump's cabinet are cowards, Nancy Pelosi had better step forward and move those articles of impeachment. They should have been done and put on the table at 4:01 a.m. on Thursday morning. But as I understand, Monday is when they're going to come. We will see. Now, Donald Trump has said he's not going to attend Joe Biden's inauguration, to which Joe Biden said, good. Perfect response. What exactly we need. Now, some interesting things. Lisa Murkowski has said that Trump should resign. Pretty surprised. A Republican. Now the cracks going to happen. Trust me, Lindsey Graham is going to turn on Donald Trump, because Lindsey always turns on people. But Lisa Murkowski is saying he's got to resign. And if the Republican Party doesn't figure it out, she may move on. Now, that doesn't mean she's going to become a Democrat, but she could become an independent, attempting to be, that go-between. So going to be interesting to see how this plays out, and if she'll vote for impeachment and removal when it gets that far. Now, again, this is interesting times. What we are living is history. You're going to tell your grandchildren and great-grandchildren about this, that you lived through this moment in history, because this has never happened before. And I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to not living history that my grandchildren will ask me about. Now, the right wing has said, no, this wasn't us. It was Antifa. I can't tell you how many emails I got from people going, but Rick, you know it was really Antifa. The FBI has come out and said there is absolutely, positively, unequivocally no evidence whatsoever to support the moronic view that Antifa had anything to do with this. In fact, the Proud Boys and their little cabal of kooks, they came out and said that they were going to dress like Antifa so that morons would say, "Yeah, it's Antifa." It isn't. It's time for these people to be held accountable. Now, the funny thing that I also see on the Eating Trump, Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, has announced that the honorary degree that they gave Donald Trump over 30 years ago, they are now rescinding. So get ready for a lot of these. All of the stuff that built him up, like chopping down a tree. These cuts are coming. But I got to tell you, the biggest thing at this moment right now that I think is bugging Donald Trump is he has been banned from Twitter. Completely banned him. He cannot throw out angry tweets. He cannot sit there and call people ugly or do the things that he's been accustomed to doing the last several years. And you know what? I wanted to have it was kind of like, I was thinking of having kind of a eulogy for his Twitter account, putting it to rest. And then I thought, just the fact that he's not out there tweeting anything is the silence enough for the rest of us. The noise has stopped for a bit. And I think that is a good thing. Now, I find it interesting that the right wing is losing their ever-loving freaking minds by going after corporate interests, because they're the ones who want to privatize everything. This is the world of privatization. Private for-profit companies have the ability to shut him up. As where, we don't. They do. They can ban him from Twitter. It is a private for-profit company. It's a publicly traded company, but it has nothing to do with our government. Because for you folks who are going to go, but we got free speech rights. No, you don't. You have free speech between you and your government, not on Twitter, not on Facebook, not on Instagram, not on MySpace, on none of them. You have no rights there. So fun times. I got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Scott Dorkin's going to be here. Stick around.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day Robert Goss, president of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union, called a nationwide strike against the oil industry. The union sought to negotiate for higher wages and better medical and dental plans in the second year of a 2-year contract. 24-hour pickets were set up immediately. For a good portion of the strike, workers at many of the refineries stopped strike-breaking scabs from entering. But some refineries used management and contract workers to maintain production levels effectively. Strikers confronted scabs daily and in a few instances faced violence on the picket lines. At least one manager crossing picket lines was charged with second-degree assault after having rammed his car into a picketer at a Texaco refinery in Washington State. In Texas City, the deaths of 2 contract workers at an Amoco refinery made news when Amoco refused to allow a union representative to accompany an OSHA inspector through the site. Amoco sought a restraining order against OSHA and accused the agency of interjecting itself into a labor dispute. At Houston's Atlantic Richfield, women mobilized to form picket lines in defiance of an injunction against union pickets. In Los Angeles, area unions including the UAW, UE, ILWU, and the Teamsters formed the Los Angeles Harbor Council in solidarity with the strike. On March 1st, the council conducted a one-day shutdown of the LA ports and strike support rally that demanded victory to the OCAW strike. Oil workers would stay out 14 weeks before the strike was finally settled. They successfully won pay increases and increases in employer contributions to the medical plan and dental plan for the very first time. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, this is one of those good days, where the silence. Can you hear the silence? Nothing from Trump on Twitter, and I think that's a good thing. And here to share some thoughts on the banning of a sitting U.S. president. I mean, this is historic. I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also the host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
How you doing, Rick?
Can you hear the banning? Can you hear the nothing in the weeds?
What's that? I can't tell. After this week of ups and downs, such a rubber band week, it really caps it off. It's terrifying to know that there's something that was being planned for the 17th, but it's really good to. A quick story about, and I'm not saying that this is what did it or anything like that, because it's the millions of us who all have complained and reported him for years. That's why they've done it, on top of the threats and the violence. But last night, Sacha Baron Cohen had reached out to me, and he reached out to a lot of people last night, and we figured to give it one more go. And it was hashtag ban Trump, save democracy. I mean, it got trending last night or whatever. And it just reminded me, because I had given up on it, close to it. I had sidelined it, and I said, this is not a priority anymore. It's not going to happen. Let's just focus on these other things. And we're like, we'll give it one last go. And we're like half asleep because we haven't slept in 5 years. But it just was amazing to see everybody come together, even though we were running on empty. And then to see the response today, after years and years of demands and asking them to, act on it. Better late than never. And I think that this timing, just, it is what it is when it comes down to, they didn't do it before, but like the timing of right now is great timing. We needed this. This is going to help cool things down. It's not going to accelerate things. Things were already accelerated. This will help cool things down. It will ease the anxiety of over half the country, if not 75%. And I can say that no one here will have to worry about what a president tweets for at least 4 years. And I think that alone is phenomenal, and people should savor that moment, given, obviously we have a fight ahead of us, and when, we're different than them. So I'll go ahead and say, by fight, I mean we have a legal fight coming up of impeachment, and we'll be focused on that next.
Yeah, no. Do you think he's going to resign over the weekend? Now, for a couple of years, you've been saying he's going to eventually resign, and I've been saying there's just under no circumstances do I ever see him resigning. I now see the possibility of this weekend him resigning, because look, his base is turning on him. Yeah. You saw Lindsey in the airport. His own base is turning on his own people, or the people that used to support him. It's going to be every person for themselves at this point with the Trump people. I see him going to Camp David and trying to just make it to the end. I don't know how many more Republicans are going to come across the aisle and reach out and support impeachment, but I can tell you this: we have the votes to impeach. We have enough support to impeach, and we're going to next week. And he's going to. It's going to be dropped on Mitch's lap, and he can make the decision as to whether or not he wants Schumer to hold a trial or he wants to hold the trial. So it's going to be expedited no matter what. The proof is out there. Everybody experienced it. But we need people to
etch their names in stone on this. We need to know exactly which side they stand on. And guess what? We already know which side they stood on because they can't get out of that. And the Trump swastika is going to be ingrained on their head for the rest of their lives. And that's just a fact. It's sad to see some people who could have done so much good for the world. But this is the sort of reckoning that we always worried about. We always worried about all of this, and we warned about it for years. And this is what happens. It all culminated into that. And then you have thousands of different Trump fans thinking that he's out in front of a march, thinking that he had already entered the Capitol building, going in and following his lead. I mean, it was just so ridiculous what kind of fantasy land they live in. And then they go in and they're like searching for Pence. They're trying to climb the wall to get into the speaker's office. I have done so many protests inside of those, inside of the Senate buildings and House buildings. And we've negotiated with the Capitol Police. There was one time we were just starting the Remove Trump movement kind of thing. And we had like 40 protesters in Hart Senate building. And they made a woman who was sitting on a medical chair, which is she can't actually stand up. And they said, if anybody sits down on the ground or sits down on a chair, like you're going to be arrested. And so they like took this woman who's 85 years old and propped her up and just took the chair away from her. So then she came up with this cool idea of she cut out cardboard wheels and attached them to them. And legally they had to let her sit on it because it was a wheelchair at that point. And my point of that is I, as a white dude, have never been arrested by Capitol Police. I have been to so many protests over the years. And it just dawned on me. I was like, wow, the difference is stark.
Yeah, no, the preparedness or lack thereon for this.
This is not prepared for them. I've never seen such lax. Somebody was in on it, or they cut down the security, or a mix of everything to allow this to happen.
So let me ask you that. Stop there. So are you saying that you believe? Because I truly believe that this goes to the highest levels. But do you believe that this was allowed to happen? That they did this on purpose?
The Capitol Police?
Whoever's in charge of them, whoever.
No. I think the Capitol Police were overwhelmed and underperformed, and they were not
the Capitol Police. The fact that if you watch the Black Lives Matter protest, we saw hundreds of people in riot gear. We saw people everywhere. We saw gates. We saw walls. We saw stuff everywhere. There was massive preparation for when the Black Lives Matter folks come in town. I didn't see any of that.
Yeah, no. I mean, this was Trump. I mean, it's clearly Trump and his followers in the government that have led this charge, and they did everything they could to probably just try to make it so they go easy on them. They probably said that over and over again, like, you're not going to touch my supporters, you're not going to do X, Y, and Z. And so they were like, well, they're not going to really do anything. And I think they rolled their eyes at it. And the first time they got to the first barrier, and there's like 5 Capitol Police officers there, thinking they're not gonna cross this, and you could tell by their faces. But then they're sitting there, they're helping people down the stairs. I mean, there were a lot of mistakes made. Keep in mind, this is a terrorist attack, and a lot of these folks have served in combat, and I think they know. You have to stand your ground, but at some point when you're outnumbered, apparently some of them left their posts once they knew that some of the people were secure. But there was a stopping point where, you're not getting past this door while the speaker and members of Congress are here.
Right. And
when someone sadly tried to breach that door, they were murdered or killed. Sorry, they not murdered. They were killed in the terrorist attack, and that is Trump's fault. And
absolutely. Now I've taken the position, Scott, that
is Trump's fault.
Over the last 4 years, we've watched these exercises happen. There was the Charlottesville, there was the quote unquote lobby day in Richmond. There have been these kind of uprisings in capitals all across the country. This was highly predictable. They should have known, should have been prepared, and not just on the Capitol Police, because they were clearly outgunned. This is a failure. I can't even say failure because I believe that this was allowed to happen specifically to get to this moment.
Yeah, I mean, like we're talking about a delay on Hogan sending in the National Guard because Trump didn't allow it. The Department of Defense delayed it for 45 minutes.
Right.
That's life or death. We're going to learn more about this. We're going to have hundreds of people who are arrested and face years and years in prison. He's going to try and save himself, and he's already acted like they're coffee boys, and he doesn't know who they are. But this is much more serious than people think, and I know that people are in shock at the moment with everything that's going on and what he's done. Even it's shocking for him, and people are dead. But I want to keep people, on the prize right now because we still have to make it through to the end here, and I think making sure that he has to fight on all fronts against impeachment, against removal, for the final days here. I think that's going to be imperative to. Obviously, we are going to impeach him. He's going to get impeached next week.
Yeah, I don't care when it happens. I don't care if it's at 11:59 on January 20th. That has to be the consequence. Because I've been saying that there has to be consequences. I don't care what level you are, how wealthy you are. If you commit sedition, if you commit treason, you need to be held accountable.
Absolutely, and I think this is redefining treason. This is this is an attack on America. This is beyond what anybody can measure. And I think that it may take the weekend for Republicans to realize what really happened here. They're going to need to expel some members of Congress. They're going to need to make sure that we have the deterrent that people pay for this and that it never happens again. Right. I mean, I'm certain that the House will be one of the more protected places. The craziest thing about this is if people forget this because it's a building, but the Capitol building is a monument. And so you're coming in and you're destroying different monuments that are within the building. There were people that took a number 2 in a hallway and they defecated all over the walls. Like, we're talking about animals and things that you would expect from the terrorists that Trump always described. Exactly what he always painted them to be afraid of, they turned into. And these are the monsters of our society. And I'm glad the one positive out of this is that they're going to get caught and they're going to be off the streets. And that we can live in peace from that. But this is obviously a widespread problem here. I do find it interesting, all these people jumping ship. Again, like I said before, if you worked for him before, the stain of Trump will haunt you for the rest of your life. Like that, it's not going to change. I'm never going to let it go. I know that millions and millions of Americans will never let it go. Republicans, Democrats, most of them will never let it go. They'll want to. We're not going to do that. And when we see the final images, the images we haven't seen, where people got hurt, where the Capitol police officer was hit with a fire extinguisher and later died, where people, dozens of Capitol police officers were assaulted. We're talking about felony after felony after felony. And you can't tell me that anyone, and this is what I've said to members of Congress that I've spoken with today and anybody that I've spoken with in leadership of any party, is basically like, I don't care I understand the rules of what takes time to do X, Y, and Z, but we need to move at lightning speed. And everyone agrees on that, but there still is those guardrails that delay. So what we're doing tonight, what we just did in the last few hours, is we launched the impeachment task force again, and everybody, we haven't sent out the notice to activate folks and whatnot, but we'll start counting the vote. In the morning, we'll release the first vote tally in regards to impeachment, and I can, again, just tell you that the number is going to be over the number we need to impeach.
Right.
At the same time, I expect dozens of members of Congress from the Republican Party, if not more, to support it, because this is a losing effort for them. And
it is. But here's the thing, and this is the problem. Will the cowards in the Senate, will they vote to remove him? My problem with this again is these are the cowardly lions. They've got to go as well. But this is that moment. This is that. Which side are you now on after you've seen what you've allowed to transpire? I've said you can't dance with the devil and get your soul back, but you can try and do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can come back to the fact that they were complicit for years. If they want to come on board now and support impeachment, I am more than willing to just be like, great, let's get this through, let's finish this. We've got your back at the moment, and then we come back to it. Now, those people do not include anybody that incited it, anybody that worked with it. So Hawley and Cruz, they need to resign. And already we have at least 5 senators who've called them the resignation. And they don't do that. They don't call on other senators to resign. That is very unique, especially Dems about to take over the leadership role. This is very bad. Hawley's been called, blood on his hands by his own papers locally. And he also has been called on to resign by the biggest papers. This is not going to go away. On top of the siege, they also broke into the governor's mansion in Washington. They protested in multiple state houses where they tried to access state houses. Luckily, they didn't get in because they didn't have the numbers to get in. But this is a widespread problem. He probably tried to do a day of action on the 17th. And that's why Twitter shut him down. They saw that developing, and they were like, this is enough. He's trying to do another one of these things, and that's enough for us. We're not going to be propaganda. Obviously, the biggest propaganda machine ever was his Twitter account.
Right.
And
now, from what I'm getting from people, there's a right-wing event being planned as we speak for the 20th. That these crazy people aren't going to go away. The ones who are eating Trump right now and blaming him and you're claiming he's sold them out. These people, they've internalized this stuff. This has been their rallying cry for decades. What are we expecting on the 20th?
I'm expecting Vice President Kamala Harris and then President Biden to be sworn in. And as I worked on the inauguration in 2009. I helped organize the train ride from Philadelphia to D.C. for President Obama. And he picked up soon-to-be President Biden in Delaware. It was one of the most confusing and complex security situations ever that I've experienced. But you've got every agency, you've got multiple states, and then you've got going into D.C. and you've got the incoming president coming on a train. There were so many layers to it.
Right.
And I can tell you this: the Secret Service doesn't mess around. The Capitol will be the most secure place in the world when he gets sworn in. There will be no protest of that. There will be no kind of insurgency or any kind of mess like that. This is the Secret Service. The Secret Service doesn't mess around, and I assume that they're going to be very excited to have the change in leadership because they're sick of them too.
Yep, right there. And then we clean up this mess, we hold them accountable, and we
Absolutely.
get this country back on track. Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you. And Rick, I just wanted to make sure we can count you in for the impeachment task force again.
Absolutely, without question, unequivocally, yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your support and for all you do. Keep up the great work. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks so much, brother. Appreciate it. Our good friend Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1939. That was the day a new radio show began on CBS Radio.
Welcome to the Motion Picture Star's own radio program, The Gulf Screen Guild Show. With Jack Bentley, Joan Crawford, Reginald Gardner.
The show featured some of the biggest names in Hollywood. All of the actors' fees were donated to the Motion Picture Relief Fund. The fund was started in 1922 with the motto of taking care of our own. Proceeds from the show went to support the Motion Picture Country Home for retired workers in the film industry. These included actors, cameramen, set designers, and even security guards. These retired workers only paid what they could afford to live there. Eventually, the retirement home allowed working people from the television industry as well. Gulf Oil sponsored the program for its first 3 seasons. It was called the Gulf Screen Guild Show. Over the years, the show took on several other sponsors and names. It also migrated to NBC, then to ABC, and then back to CBS Radio. In all, it ran for 14 seasons and more than 500 episodes. In its early years, the show was a variety review. It included songs along with dramatic and comedy sketches. Later, the show recreated films for the radio audience. It was a challenge to get a whole film down to just 22 minutes. Films covered by the show included classics such as Casablanca, Arsenic and Old Lace, and Pinocchio. But despite the changes and challenges, the show raised $800,000 for the retirement home by 1942. The retirement home was almost closed in 2009, but continues operations. Workers in many industries have long found creative and collaborative ways to support each other and to truly take care of their own. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, while we're focused on, how we're dealing with this invasion of our nation's capital, you gotta wonder what's the rest of the world thinking. This is the kind of stuff you expect in third world banana republics. This is the kind of stuff that you expect in Venezuela. This is the stuff you expect in the Middle East. You don't expect to have a terrorist organization right here in our own backyard. But I've been saying for years, they've been here. The right-wing money has been flowing to them, and now they've got their guy in the White House, and I've been saying that for the longest time. So don't give me, oh, I was surprised. Don't give me, oh, I can't believe they did that. This has been coming. The only thing that is surprising to me is it hasn't happened sooner. And here to share some thoughts on, well, how does the rest of the world, especially China, how do they view what happened on Wednesday? And what does this mean for our relations? What does it mean for our standing in the world? And here to share some thoughts, I've asked Emily de la Bruyere to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of the Horizon Advisory. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's start right with that, with your thoughts of, because you live in Washington, D.C. What did you think of what you saw on Wednesday?
Well, I'll take the direct China angle because that's what I do. But I guess what I'm thinking about is that China is sitting around laughing. And Beijing's laughing because we're tearing ourselves apart so they don't have to. And they're laughing because this undermines our entire global narrative. How are we supposed to talk about Hong Kong now? What does this do for the events that took place in Hong Kong over the weekend? It not only sweeps them under the carpet, but it also absolutely undermines our ability to make any arguments about them. And of course, China is also working because we're not, because we're down. And so not incrementally anymore, but aggressively and explicitly, they can accelerate their global strategy to take advantage of the vacuum we've left and to try to take over the global order.
Yeah, so by our failure over the last 4 years, and look, the one thing that that Trump came in that I agreed with him on is that we have to deal with China. And I was very upfront about that during the election. The blind squirrel found the nut. We have to deal with China. I agreed with the tariffs. I agreed with taking on our trade policy. But he's boogered the whole thing up. And I would argue this makes it considerably worse. And the most egregious part of all this is, all the Trump flags and all the MAGA hats and all of the paraphernalia that we saw, perverting our capital, were probably all made in China. That's the thing that drives me just absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not going to be able to do anything about the existential threat to our country, to our prosperity, to our security, to the world order if we are absolutely divided at home. And of course, the flip side is that in many ways, this is also the answer, right? The way to figure out who we are, in theory, is to rally around a cause and to rally around our own norms and to do what this particular kind of contest requires, which is to invest in our national industry. Like, in theory, all of these different conflicts can work together or can be combined to find like one real joint solution, but unclear that we're going to get there.
Yeah. Now your organization has put out a study here recently that the New York Times did a piece on today about solar panels and how the Chinese government, the communist Chinese government, is dominating the world in the manufacturing of these by using slave labor. And again, I go back to Trump was right in pointing out that we need to take on China. Only again, he made it worse. Explain to me what you guys found in your study.
Yeah. So China is the dominant global player in the solar industry chain. And solar rests on one key input, which is polysilicon. Most of China's polysilicon is produced in Xinjiang, which is the northwestern province in China that is the home of most of the Uyghur ethnic minority and the main site of China's genocide against that minority, a genocide that includes forced and slave labor. So we looked at polysilicon production in Xinjiang, and we found clear, compelling evidence of ties between the production of polysilicon and therefore the solar supply chain and China's practice of forced labor imposed on the Uyghur minority. And the way China's industry works and the way it's integrated, that means that pretty much the entire solar supply chain coming out of China is built on slavery. And therefore, that as we lean on China, which is the dominant producer of solar energy infrastructure and inputs, we're leaning on forced labor and slavery in Xinjiang.
So again, you come back to this. We're in this race to the bottom of our trade policy, and we're competing because we're told this all the time that Americans, we love to pop off our chest and say how wonderful we are, that we can compete with anyone. Let me be the first to say it right now. We can't compete with slave labor. We can't compete with a country that cheats on its currency. We can't compete with a country that subsidizes heavily their industries. I'm sorry, we just can't compete with that.
Yeah, and I mean those subsidies are enormous, right? They've absolutely followed out the American solar industry as just one example of all the different key, foundational, critical industries of the future in which China has managed to claim the critical nodes of manufacturing. And so in this case, it's this is the energy of the future in theory, right? That's what they say. So we're not only surrendering our energy independence to China because we're relying on their inputs for our solar industry, but we're also building that industry on slave labor. And so then you have to ask yourself, are we really that unwilling to invest in our domestic industry that we're going to sacrifice our security and our values?
Yeah, we are. Evidently, after Wednesday, I got to tell you, I've got my minds have changed on a lot of things. The sad reality is are we a racist, homophobic, crazy country in this moment? Yeah, we're all of those things. Are we ripping ourselves to shreds right down the middle? Yeah, because we've had a leader for the last 4 years who has been not just using the dog whistle of the Republican Party for the last 40 years, but he's been hammering it out right out in public. But also, the fact that this isn't just Donald Trump. I don't want to give him too much credit. This is the big moneyed interest. These are the corporations who fled this country to go to China, who have been cashing in on slave labor and on our demise. This is all of that and then some. So we've got a lot of cleaning up to do over the next 20 years probably, if we have that long. Because I got to tell you, as we're eating our own, China's just getting stronger and stronger and dominating around the globe. So while we're having this moment, they're moving forward.
Yes, and COVID is so good for them. COVID and, of course, our national demise is so good for them on this. And I mean, we talked 6-7 months ago now at the very beginning of this pandemic and the story we were going on about was like, look at China's industrial policy and looking at them try to take advantage of this crisis to accelerate their strategy, move it forward by 5, 10, 15 years. And I mean, it really does look like we're going to come out of this when we do come out of this. And by this, I mean the pandemic, because all the other domestic stuff going to take a while longer. We're going to come out of this and China will have won and the battle will be over.
And the thing is, we love to say how much military might we have. We like to puff off our chest and say how much we spend on military, and we've got all these toys, and we're literally losing the war that we're not fighting.
Yeah, and we can't even make our own toys.
And you're not just talking about like kid toys. You're talking about the bombs and the missiles and the things that we're supposed to be making because of the Berry Amendment. I know our friends at the Alliance for American Manufacturing came out with a book a couple of years ago of all of the things that we can't make for our military and how our defense systems are in peril because we don't make this stuff anymore, because we allowed Chinese companies to come and buy up our industries and dominate these industries by using slave labor, cheating on currency, manipulating the markets, and also, basically the Communist Party owning industries.
Yeah. And of course, compounding all of that is that we haven't realized that there's a war underway, right? Like, we haven't realized, woken up. And I mean, as you said, the narrative has changed or did change under the Trump administration, but that there was no recognition that this is like actually a third world war, or China sees it that way, and that there's a global order being fought over, and it's not going to be our really fancy aircraft carriers that are going to win this one.
Right. So let me ask you this, because like Trump supporters, like it or not, Joe Biden is going to be president at noon on January 20th, even if he has to take it from Mike Pence, which is probably going to happen. What does Joe Biden do? I mean, we have so many things. The pandemic first and foremost. We've got this constitution, this crisis of our government. We've got terrorists, I believe, in our halls of power. How do we deal with the outside battles when we're fighting all this? And what does Joe Biden have to do to deal with China?
Ultimately, it all comes down to our national infrastructure and our national industrial capacity. And I do think that especially if you combine that with the ability to regain a place of leadership in the multilateral order, those answer so many of the challenges we're facing. Like, I mean, divisiveness in the US domestically, right? That's a function of economic issues caused by a hollowing out of industry. That's a focus of a failure of the media infrastructure, which is just like a different kind of infrastructure. It's caused by, similarly, a failure of the educational infrastructure. Like, if we get all of this together and we actually invest in American infrastructure, that also means investing in American industry. And that's the contest that China's fighting too. So we put our resources, and we still, based on our place in the global order, have an upper hand in actually being able to leverage international resources. So we put those into a better America, and a better America that can actually produce what's necessary for the emerging industrial future and the competition that comes with that. Because if we can do that, if we can compete over new energy vehicles or emerging telecommunications infrastructures or data centers, if we can compete over those and we have the infrastructure for the provision of the goods and services that are built on those, then we have a leg to stand on in the international world system when we talk about their standards and their rules and the systems that are built around these for the new industrial revolution that's taking place around the world. Yeah. And that's what China's fighting for, right? China's fighting to set this industrial revolution, and they can do that because they're making everything. So if we can make that here, if we have a stronger multilateral voice, and if that's what we compete for, we manage to invest in a frustrated American population. Potentially we can provide services better, and we can be more competitive.
And we can create the jobs people need to be able to survive and get this economy going again. So, you're the expert on this. The narrative, as the right has tried to get us to believe, is that somehow Joe Biden is China's choice. I'm sure you've heard all of the China Joe and all that stuff. How much confidence do you have in Biden's plan to take on China and to do some of the things that you think we need to do?
It's so difficult. And I think we'll see a lot in the quote unquote first 100 days. The problem is that the traditional frameworks and the traditional policy tools, and those are the ones in which obviously Biden has been steeped, are also ones that China has manipulated. So you can have the best intentions of the world and you can say, I'm going to go invest in American infrastructure and new energy, but what you're actually investing in is Chinese solar production that's based on slave labor. So the question is, can the Biden administration take their intentions and question their assumptions and really look back at labor routes and look at supply chains and also look at how it is that China competes and how that might be different than how we think they compete or how we have, and formulate a strategy around that. And I think that there has been a reckoning in China policy over the past 4 years. I think that it's unlikely we see a reiteration of the Obama administration's China policy, which would be really bad. And that gives me hope. And like Biden's roots are the right ones, right, in terms of labor, for us to have hope. The question is whether there's actually the necessary rethinking of what tools the American system has. And then, of course, the other question is the first priority is going to be attempting to heal the rifts in American society. Is that going to push China aside, or is there going to be the realization that, in fact, these could be two mutually complementary ambitions?
No, that's an excellent point. Are we going to be able to heal within? Because you're not going to be able to fight the battles that are coming from the outside. And, for me, you talked about infrastructure. There's no point in rebuilding our infrastructure if we're not using American-made steel and concrete and all of the things that are going into that infrastructure. If those things aren't made here and we're using, communist steel, if we're doing what we did out in California, building a bridge that is never going to be completed with subpar material, unlike we did in New York when they rebuilt the Tappan Zee, which was on time, under budget, and made with and created American jobs. We're going to have a problem if we continue that model.
Exactly. And China's assumption is that we will. And so all of our bumper stickers of, we're investing in ourselves now, we're investing in ourselves, are actually giving them a window to develop an even stronger foothold over our industry, make us more dependent, make us less able to produce our own goods, and give them the capacity they need to fight over the emerging frontiers.
Yeah, let me ask you the last question I've got for you as someone who lives in Washington, and this is just purely a personal thing. What feeling do you get out of what happened Wednesday? I've not been as angry as I've been on Wednesday since I think 9/11. But I'm curious where you were.
I think fear was the dominant one. I don't think I have even gotten to the anger yet because the fear is so pervasive, and not just of in the moment on Wednesday, but also that this isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
And it's not like that was an anomalous event the same way it's not like the past year was an anomaly. Like, all of these things are real and they're continuing, and this is now the world as we know it.
Yeah, sad stuff. Emily, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff. I look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend, Emily de la Bruyere. Make sure you check out her website, horizonadvisory.org. We'll get links out on how you can do that. She's the co-founder of the Horizon Advisory. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Often, significant days in history pass with little attention. This day in labor history is one such day. The year was 1811, and Charles Deslandes, an enslaved sugar laborer in the New Orleans Territory, led what became one of the largest slave revolts in American history. The Deslandes family, along with Charles, had been in Haiti during the slave uprising of the Haitian Revolution. They fled the revolution to what was then called the German Coast, an area of sugar plantations northwest of New Orleans. On the evening of January 8th, Charles led an insurrection at the Andre Plantation. The insurrection grew as enslaved laborers marched down the Mississippi River armed with axes, hoes, and a few firearms. They burnt plantations on their march. It's estimated that as many as 500 enslaved laborers joined the revolt over the two-day march. The revolution was put down brutally, however, by plantation owners and their militias, as well as federal troops who killed more than 90 of the revolting slaves. The plantation bosses, with their militias and the federal troops, hung some of the bodies of those who took part in the revolt on poles as warnings to other enslaved people. Such uprisings ushered in an era of brutal repression, as authorities worried that the Haitian Revolution could spread to the U.S. South. Slave codes, the laws that undergirded the slave system, became more strict and oppressive, yet enslaved people continued their effort for freedom until they finally won emancipation more than 5 decades later. And what happened to Charles Deslandes, you may ask? Well, he was captured by the militia. As Samuel Hamilton described, Charles had his hands chopped off, then shot in one thigh and then the other, until they were both broken, then shot in the body. And before he had expired, he was put into a bundle of straw and roasted. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So one of the questions that I keep coming back to is, what are we going to do with all of these people that are being arrested? And there have been over more than 100 people so far arrested, and good. We should be locking these people up, every one of them. Maximum sentences for people who are going to invade our nation's capital and attempt this seditious act. But the thing that really bothered me today, as I saw the Justice Department came out, when asked whether there could be any charges criminally against Donald Trump, and they said, well, probably not. No. And ultimately, I think Wednesday made it almost impossible for there not to be an investigation into him and for him not to stand trial somewhere. That could be New York. And here to share some thoughts on accountability and maybe what we do with all of these people, I've asked Aliza Olens to come talk with us. She's a New York City public defender, also candidate for Manhattan District Attorney. Aliza, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, you were so close. Eliza.
Oh, damn it. And I just wrote that down.
You even said it right before. But listen, I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. And I think, this is such an important thing that we need to be talking about, because in reality, the thing that keeps a refrain that we keep having to say is no one is above the law. Yep. No one is above the law.
No, and this is what I keep telling my kids. The reality is, I don't care who you are. There needs to be consequences. And I don't care if it's President of the United States. There has to be consequences for not just what happened Wednesday, but for all of the crimes that have happened throughout this last 4 years. There has to be someone to hold him accountable.
Well, not just this last 4 years, but if you think about the fact that this is someone who has been purportedly committing crimes in New York City and across the country for years and years prior to that. I mean, we would not be in this mess that we are in if the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance, had not failed to prosecute Trump and the entire Trump family. In the early 2010, 2011, 2012, he dropped cases against them and, has constantly given breaks to those who are wealthy and well-connected and powerful. And we are seeing the far-reaching consequences that local DA actions have on an entire nation.
Yeah, I mean, had someone done their job before 2015, maybe we wouldn't have had to live through the nightmare of the last 4 years. That's an excellent point.
Exactly. But for the fact that Cy Vance failed to prosecute the Trumps in 2012, we might not have ever had a President Trump. We might not have ever had to live through any of this, but this is someone who has constantly really not held those who are rich and powerful accountable. I mean, this is a guy who argued for leniency for Jeffrey Epstein, who didn't prosecute Harvey Weinstein for years on end, and not going after the Trumps is probably the one that has the biggest consequences to our entire nation.
Now, I get people who tell me Cy Vance is this great crusader. He's going to be the one who's going to hold Trump accountable, and I fully expect something. So you're saying he should have done this sooner, and now this could be seen as more political. Is that where I'm getting?
Well, so the interesting thing about like when people call these prosecutions political, I mean, I think that like sometimes the impression is that progressive prosecutors are motivated by their decisions, like motivated by politics and their decision making. But in fact, it's quite the opposite. You know, DAs like Cy Vance who avoid prosecuting cases against the rich and powerful when they're going to be challenging and carry political risk, and then magically suddenly become interested in prosecuting these cases when they become politically advantageous to them. That is what is political in nature, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're in this really weird time because, there's been such a sense of lawlessness around him and his administration that, it doesn't matter, I think, especially to his base, who's now, I hope, waking up to the reality of the situation he has put this country in. And maybe they're going to be the ones calling for accountability. But at the end of this, I keep going back to that, and I know it sounds like a broken record, but, the old Beretta thing, you do the time if you do the crime. Everyone should be held accountable for what they do on Wednesday or any other day.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about like you do the time if you do the crime is that really only applies to some people. And I've seen that over and over. I mean, I've spent over a decade of my life as a public defender here in Manhattan, and I've seen the way in which people like my clients who are predominantly Black and brown, who are lower income, sometimes LGBTQIA or people with disabilities, people who are marginalized, the way they are treated. They are forced to do time for things that are crimes, if you will. And meanwhile, other people are treated completely differently. And I think that the events of Wednesday really bore that out. I mean, if you think about the fact that, and so many people have articulated this so well, Congresswoman Cori Bush and many others who said, if the people storming the Capitol had been Black and brown, can you even imagine what a bloodbath that would have been?
No.
I mean, they all would have been just shot dead. And there's really no question in my mind that that's true. And instead, we saw videos of police officers pulling gates to the side and welcoming people in.
No, that's I look at this and look, I'm a white guy and I know I have white privilege, but that was full on display for the nation to see. And there's no way that you can deny what happened on Wednesday was a kind of a stupid version of white privilege.
Yeah. And, I kind of almost hate to compare it to the peaceful BLM protests that went on all summer. I was out in the streets marching with people, and we were peacefully exercising our First Amendment rights to protest and to speak out about police violence. And I don't think anything about what happened on Wednesday was legitimate in nature, so I hesitate to make that comparison. But I do think that, watching these fascists and these domestic terrorists be welcomed with open arms to destroy and terrorize our nation's capital it's heart-wrenching for all of us. And I think that, a lot of what's happening is what we've heard now after the fact, that so many of the people who were there to terrorize the Capitol were flashing their badges. The infiltration of law enforcement by people who are part of these extremist groups has really grown a great deal. And I think we really need to think about how to address that.
No, that's an excellent point, because there were a lot of, cops taking selfies with these people and all of this stuff. So, in going forward, because, there's been that accusation that, our police forces have this stream running through it. We have to get rid of that. But, and how do you change that culture? I go back to this story. I have a friend who was I would say probably the most docile human being I've ever met. 2 years on the police force, a college university police force in a city. He turned into somebody who was violent, got thrown off the force for police brutality at some point down the line, and became racist as well. And I just say it was, well, that's the culture. Is that just an excuse, or is that really part of what you see?
it's hard because I think that there are so many people who say, oh, with additional training, or it's a few bad apples. But I think that when you really look at it, when you think about, the experience of your friend who went in without having those tendencies and then turned into something else, that it is the culture, that it is like, the infiltration of these police forces with white supremacists, with people who have sympathies and allegiances to these racist and fascist extremist groups. And so I think that we really need to think about how we're going to address this. And I hope that, there'll be a full investigation, by the Department of Justice under the Biden administration as to what really happened, that allowed our Capitol to be permeated, that forced our congressmen and women to be barricaded in their offices, hiding under desks, looking around for weapons and afraid for their lives on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's incredible. But I look back at this this moment because as I said, I have friends who are policemen. Some of them are good. Some of them I have questions about. And they all keep coming back to, well, the reason is because these are the people that we deal with. These are the people that we constantly have to arrest. And for me, it comes back to the massive economic inequality that we have in this country. That if you're dealing with a class of people who are in poverty, who are trying to figure out how to survive, and then you over police those areas, and with zero tolerance crackdowns, you create that kind of tension, I think, to where it's almost natural to see someone that you're constantly arresting and constantly treating in an inhumane fashion as inhumane.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the big reasons I'm running for Manhattan District Attorney, is that I've seen the way in which our system is cruel and unjust and inhumane, and that treats people in a horrific way and really is just rampantly violating human rights and human dignity. And I'm seeing that, many of my opponents are people who've spent their careers as prosecutors, who've held positions of power in organizations that have perpetuated this inhumane system. And I've watched as people have, really just had their lives destroyed by our criminal legal system, by these arrests for low-level offenses that, in fact, shouldn't be prosecuted at all. That as DA, I would not prosecute. I mean, I have stories that I tell, like, for example, I talk about a client of mine who worked as an assistant manager at a grocery store in Lower Manhattan. He'd worked at the same grocery store for 25 years. And one night he was closing up the store. It was around 11 o'clock at night. He bought 2 bags of groceries with his employee discount to bring home to his family. And he locked up the store, walked over to the subway. He got on the Uptown A train to head home, and he put 2 bags of groceries on the seats next to him on the uncrowded subway car. He got to the 125th Street stop. 2 uniformed NYPD officers got on the train, grabbed his groceries, dumped them to the ground, and placed him in handcuffs and took him to jail for the night for the crime of occupying multiple seats on a transit facility. Literally taking up 2 seats on the subway. And he spent the night in jail for that. And so, like, the anger and heartbreak and frustration at the way the system operates, the way that it is just rigged against those who are, not wealthy and well-connected and powerful, who are just, who are lower income folks, who are Black and brown people, who are marginalized in some way. It's just so unjust. And we need to fix it. We need to change this system.
Manhattan, right?
Yep.
Wall Street, right?
Yep.
So we're gonna go after a guy, trash his groceries, lock him up in jail, for taking up 2 seats, and yet Wall Street, full of the biggest criminals on the planet, we don't do anything to them.
Exactly. There are people who are perpetrating harms on our communities, who are stealing to the tune of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And yet it's my clients who maybe walk into a CVS and take a Snickers bar because they're hungry, or take a pint of ice cream for $4.99. And those are the people who are arrested and taken to jail and prosecuted.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to 2000, 2008 into 2009. I was expecting perp walks on a daily. I was predicting a Macy's kind of parade of criminals being arrested and prosecuted, and that didn't happen. I guess we were too busy going after the guy with the ice cream and the guy taking up 2 seats.
Yeah, well, actually, what's very interesting is Cy Vance is the only prosecutor in the nation who did bring a criminal case after the 2008 collapse. And that was, in fact, the wrong prosecution to bring. Like he brought the one criminal prosecution against a bank. And you know what it was? It was against a Chinese American family-owned bank. And he was like, he saw it as low-hanging fruit. He's like, great, I'll get a criminal conviction, good for me. And it was another racist prosecution. The family had to spend millions of dollars to defend this case, take it all the way to trial, years of their lives, and eventually finally got a full acquittal. But for him to go after this family-owned bank, to say the one criminal prosecution I'm going to bring in 2008, from 2008, is against this Chinese family-owned bank, it was so wrong and so unjust as well. So again, giving breaks to the real people, to the cases that would be difficult, that would be politically unpopular.
How can people help? How can people help you to get into a position? Because I'm of the mindset we need to have better people in these positions, district attorneys and House of Representative and state legislator positions. We need to have decent, honest people, hardworking people in these positions. How can people help you out?
Well, I'd be so grateful for the support. People can go to ElizaOrlins.com. That's ElizaOrlins.com. And they can get involved. We need their donations, because another way in which these systems are maintained, the way that it's so difficult to upset the status quo, is in campaign finance laws. Right now, the donation limit in my race per individual donor is $35,000. If you'd wanted to give to Joe Biden in the primary, the max you could give is $2,800. So it's more than 10 times the federal limit. And this means there are people in the race who are getting checks, who make 10 phone calls, get 10 friends to give 35 grand and raise $350,000 in an afternoon. But we are doing it from thousands and thousands of grassroots supporters across the nation. We have people giving, $1, $5, $25, whatever they can chip in. And that is how we are making our movement happen, because we're a people-powered movement. We're out there accountable to all the people who are supporting us. And we're so grateful for the support. And we have a filing deadline Monday at midnight. So if anyone can give between now and then, we would be greatly, greatly appreciated.
And the website again was?
ElizaOrlins.com.
And we'll make sure we get links out on social media and how folks can do that. I'll make sure that I'm going to give a donation. So people, please join me in donating to ElizaOrlins.com. Like I said, we'll get that out on social media so people can do that. Last question I've got for you, because I look at these moments, and if you had like a 30-second, that elevator speech, why you over some of the other folks?
That's a great one. So, the real thing is that we need is someone who truly understands what this criminal legal system has done to people. And this is a system that has allowed prosecutors to destroy people's lives with impunity, and then look back and say, oh, well, maybe I made a mistake, or I was wrong, or, this is something that the system was really at fault for, or I was doing my job. But the reality is, the experience of being a prosecutor, I would implore everyone who's listening to think about what it really means to have prosecutorial experience in America, to have played an active role in a system this unjust and cruel, and to have held a position of power in an organization that has rampantly violated human rights and human dignity. What prosecutors do every day to the people like the people I represent is cruel and inhumane and plainly wrong. And it's taken far too long for us to really acknowledge that. And I think we cannot trust an arsonist to be the one to put out the fire. How can we trust someone to change a system in which they've been complicit? And so it's public defenders, not former prosecutors, who have the experience we need, who have demonstrated the commitment to acknowledging these problems and trying to fix them. I've spent my entire career going up against the Manhattan DA's office, and I've represented thousands of people charged with crimes, handling as many as 200 cases at one time. And for every human being I've represented, I've had to manage countless moving parts, from strategic decisions and interviewing witnesses to managing teams with investigators and social workers and expert witnesses, and all at the same time never losing sight of the fact that there is a human being at the heart of the case with a unique story and a unique circumstance. This is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's sibling, someone's loved one. And when prosecutors make these decisions that have devastating impacts on people's lives, they're not the ones who are picking up the pieces. It's public defenders who are advocating for restorative justice and rehabilitation and who are working to break this cycle and change the system. And that is the experience that we need. And so I will be the next Manhattan DA who is focused on bringing about real transformative change and changing this system and bringing us to the right side of history. This is so long overdue. And I have the experience to understand the implications of these policies in the real world. And I have the authentic commitment to changing them. And so I hope you will all join me in this fight. And I would be so grateful and honored to receive your support.
Excellent stuff. I love the passion. I wish you the best. I hope folks will go to the website and donate, ElizaOrleans.com. We'll make sure we get links out. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be here.
Good talking with you. Again, ElizaOrleans.com. We'll get links out. Make sure that you donate. I'm going to do it here during the break. Make sure that you do as well. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We humans have got to get a whole lot smarter, says Elon Musk, the billionaire founder of Tesla Automobiles and CEO of SpaceX Rockets. Musk is not merely reacting to humanity's recent tendency to elect lunatics to lead our countries. Rather, he's trying to warn us about the rapid rise of a radical new technology, artificial intelligence. In common parlance, he's referring to robots, but these are not the clunky, somewhat cute machines performing rote tasks. AI essentially has evolved to become an electronic brain, a web of ever more complex supercomputers interacting as one cognitive unit that can program itself, make decisions, and act independently of the humans who are creating them. These thinking machines are rapidly increasing in number and geometrically advancing their IQ, prompting Musk and others to view AI technologies in apocalyptic terms. As algorithms and systems inevitably grow more sophisticated, he says, digital intelligence will exceed biological intelligence by a substantial margin. In graphic terms, Musk warns that profiteering humans are, quote, summoning the devil by creating a new superior species of beings that will end up dominating humanity, becoming, quote, an immortal dictator from which we would never escape. What's weird is not his dystopian prognosis. Other experts confirm that runaway bot intelligence is a real threat, but his solution. The way for us human beings to compete with AI, says Musk, is to merge with it. Not a corporate transaction, but a literal merger. Surgically implant AI devices in human brains with, quote, a bunch of tiny wires that would fuse people with superintelligence. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's good to have technological geniuses alert us to looming dangers, but maybe the larger community of humanists ought to lead the search for answers.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I think she's fantastic. I'd hate to have her hunting me down. So look out, Donald. I know he's not probably going back to Manhattan. He's not going to go to Florida either because they're not going to let him stay in Mar-a-Lago. And Scotland has said, hey, you're not welcome here either. It'll be kind of interesting to see where he goes. I've got a good place for him, though. Rikers Island would be a great place to put him. In fact, I think that should be the future site of his presidential library. We could give him his own cell. You can give him all the toilet paper to write his memoirs on. I think that would be great. And then in 2026, when it's closed, we can leave him in it in solitary, and then we can come by and visit. And there are plenty of rooms for the rest of the kids. Bring Dumb Jr. and Eric and Ivanka and the whole clan, the whole cabal right there in Rikers Island, and make that his presidential library. Because at this point, I know there's a presidential library commission. That every president gets one, and I visited a couple of them, and I love them. They're fantastic. In fact, I even went to the George W. Bush presidential library, which is great. It's like short attention span theater. You get to go and play the decider guy, where you go in this room, and then they hit you with all this. Oh, well, the economy's just crashed, Mr. President. The Wall Street's crashed. And they're calling for news. The senators come and give a briefing. You get like 2 minutes worth of what would you do in the crash, and then you get to decide. And then if the room people decide, and then he comes out and of course recorded, and gives his explanation. It's a great day of fun, and in fact, it has a great library as well. My pet goat. Probably somewhere in the book, but of the entire place, and I don't want to go on too much about the Bush Library, but my favorite thing in the entire place is they had this little game, this little block of wood. It's a triangle, and it was right next to the woman with the ink on her finger picture, but it was this little triangle of wood that was on a ball, and you were trying to figure out how to balance the powers, and it was a balance of powers game at a presidential library. This is the kind of stuff that's in the Bush Presidential Library. But I'm kind of thinking like a golden toilet. I think that would be good. All the Rikers Island toilets would be golden. Kind of bathrobes and curmudgeon-y stuff. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great fun. We could make money off of it. Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. But the sad reality is, and I think she's right. I think. Elisa's right. The culture of our policemen have to be dealt with. We're in this really this interesting moment. I'm now coming down from my anger, and I'm now coming to, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to move forward. This is an opportunity for us to reach some of the ones we can reach. Prosecute the ones that are complicit, the ones who are involved in this, but begin to heal in a better way. I've watched some of the right wing, the people who caused this. I've watched some of them try and repair their images. Ain't having it. I'll have none of that. But the guy I talked to yesterday, and I talked a little bit about this in the program yesterday. This guy was truly having a moment of conscience. He was truly having a moment of dismay, where he did not believe that that's what he was a part of. That he truly believed that he was fighting to make the country better, not fighting to overthrow it. And that gives me hope. It gives me hope that we're seeing some people saying, maybe we went too far. And I remember, I had, growing up, I had a friend who, his parents, he was German, and his grandparents had come right from Germany. And, I remember having conversations with the grandfather, who said, most people couldn't believe what had happened. Most people couldn't believe what was going on, but they went along with it. And because they got pulled into it. Some people, and I'm not giving these folks cover yet, but I think some of the people who voted for Trump can be put in that category. Some of them can be redeemed. Most of them not. And we don't need most of them. We need some of the sane and rational. Some of the people who used to pull the Republican lever because it's what I've always done. I'm hoping there's a way forward in this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Do you think I'm crazy? Now, look, I've gotten tons of response on this. Maybe it's my sunny, optimistic disposition, which anybody who knows me knows that is not me at all. I'm trying here. I'm trying to come up with some positive out of this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Send us a tweet at Rick Smith Show. Direct message us. Love to hear that. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend, former Congressman Bob Ney, going to be here to share some thoughts. And I'll tell you, on Wednesday when we talked with Bob, he did surprise me with his calls that what we saw was sedition. He did surprise me with how far he went. So I'm interested to see what Bob's got to say on what's happened thus far. Going to take a quick break. Right back with Bob. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Every day I'm in the United States Senate, I will fight for you. I will fight for your family.
But let me tell you this. There is no doubt that this is already a victory for the ages.
Democrats win majority in U.S. Senate, paving the way for climate legislation. Trump administration, amid attempted coup, auctions off drilling rights in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Plus, Britain achieves new record in offshore wind energy generation.
All of those achievements and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So showerheads, you take...
Nope, shut up. You're out. You're not welcome here anymore, insurrectionist. This is our Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, do you think we can get through the rest of Donald Trump's term without having to play any more Donald Trump on the Green News Report?
I hope so.
I think you will be richly rewarded if so.
Well, as we go to air in the wake of the shocking, violent insurrection by Donald Trump supporters who attacked and temporarily shut down the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday, there is some normal news, and it's good news for all life on the planet. Democrats appear to have won control of the U.S. Senate majority after the runoff elections in Georgia this week, with Democratic candidates Reverend Raphael Warnock unseating incumbent Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler and John Ossoff beating incumbent Republican Senator David Perdue.
That's good news for the entire planet?
Yep. Once confirmed, the Democrats will have a razor-thin margin of just one vote via Democratic Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as tiebreaker. Majorities in both houses of Congress are crucial to reversing Donald Trump's and Republicans' attacks on the environment and public health, and will enable the incoming Biden administration to pass aggressive climate legislation. However, with such a narrow Senate majority, conservative Democratic senators like Joe Manchin of the coal state of West Virginia will hold enormous power. Manchin will be the chair of the key Senate committee responsible for advancing any climate-related legislation.
Oh, my God. Really?
Yep.
And that makes Joe Manchin, if this is important news for the entire world, that makes Joe Manchin the most important man in the entire world.
Meanwhile, the outgoing Trump administration is still in smash and grab mode. In Arizona, the administration will approve a controversial land swap, allowing global mining giant Rio Tinto to develop a copper mine on land held sacred by Native American tribes. And the administration this week auctioned off the first ever oil and gas drilling rights in Alaska's pristine Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, one of Trump's biggest environmental rollbacks and a victory in Republicans' 40-year fight to open up to the fossil fuel industry one of the nation's last remaining wild places.
Yes, please note, that was not just Donald Trump doing crazy Donald Trump things. That was something Republicans have been trying to do for decades to despoil the Alaskan wilderness on behalf of oil companies.
But in a stunning setback on Wednesday, the lease sale was a flop.
What?
Attracting just 3 bidders. And it raised just $14 million, a minuscule fraction of the revenue that Republicans projected as an offset to justify their 2017 tax cut for the rich.
It's as if oil companies don't want to drill for oil anymore for some reason.
Now, of course, the incoming Biden administration can repeat repeal these rules in coming months and years. However, with majorities in both houses of Congress, Democrats can utilize the Congressional Review Act to vote to rescind Trump administration rules, rollbacks, and guidances that were finalized in the last 6 months using a simple majority. No filibuster allowed.
That is huge news. I think it's a law put in place by Republicans who will now be hoisted on their own petard.
In other news, in Michigan, a federal judge has invalidated a key wetlands permit for a proposed open-pit mine in the Upper Peninsula. And in a twist, the state agency that granted the permit 2 years ago said this week it agrees with the judge's ruling. Massachusetts has announced a new mandate that by 2035 it will end the sale of new gasoline-powered vehicles within its borders in order to reduce the state's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change. Finally, some good news for Britain. Thanks to some gnarly storms over the holidays, Britain generated more than half of its national daily electricity from offshore wind farms for the first time ever. The UK government says the country is headed for, quote, its greenest year on record.
In a dark week, that is a lot of surprisingly bright news. Thank you. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, or Google Podcasts. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've at least made it this far. I gotta wonder if the nuclear codes have been taken from our Twitler in chief. He's still, Twitter's cut him off, Facebook's cut him off. I guess Instagram. I guess Pinterest is the only one who hasn't yet. But maybe them too. I guess MySpace has even booted him. But here's a guy still walking around with the nuclear football. That's a scary, scary thing. Here to share some thoughts on it. Well, will we make it the next 12 days? Are we going to make it? I've got our good friend, former Congressman, political analyst Bob Ney to share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So we're going to make it? We're going to make it to the 20th?
Well, I don't know. When I sent you my message tonight, I said I'll be on if they give him the football. I mean, I think people are thinking about it. Obviously, Speaker Pelosi said something, about it. I think if you look, Rick, at what's going on, the resignations of the cabinet, and not just resignations, but what they're saying when they resign. Betsy DeVos, Elaine Chao. Transportation Secretary, it's what they're saying, also staffers. I believe right now that it's kind of a lonely place. The Vice President's Chief of Staff has been banned from the West Wing. And so it's an isolation thing. You've got President Trump, his children, and Kushner. And that's practically just about it. In fact, the only reason we found out today that he made the statement he did a following day from the terrible, event that went on at the Capitol was because his daughter talked him into doing that. So let's hope she has a lot of influence. But I think, Rick, in all sincerity, people that are left around him are going to watch closely what he says.
Yeah. Do you think he makes the weekend? Do you think he resigns over the weekend?
No. There's one thing about let's go to impeachment first, if we could.
Okay.
People say, well, why impeach? And I think they have to watch if they bring impeachment up. If they're going to do it, bring it up. Then bring it up. Now, does he have to be convicted in the Senate before he leaves office? No, he could be impeached by the House, which, by the way, can be done in a day.
Right. Should have been done at 4 o'clock
in a day.
Should have been done 4 o'clock in the morning on Thursday.
Right. Could have been done in a day, and then he leaves office. Schumer becomes majority leader of the Senate, and then the conviction could occur. And if they have all the votes lined up, then it's okay, I think, to talk about it. If they don't, I don't know if it's, quote, a matter of principle just for the House to do it. Now, when people say, well, why do it? He would lose his pension. He would lose a $1 million travel allowance. He would lose lifetime Secret Service, and he would lose his ability to run. That's what would happen if he was successfully impeached and convicted.
Wow.
Yes, people aren't even thinking about that. He would not just lose the ability to run; he would lose, all of those other things. So again, if they're going to do it, I think that's one of those things. If you're going to say impeachment, you need to count the vote. Count the vote in the Senate. They need to count their votes, and then you don't just do it to do it with X amount of days remaining. As far as the resignation, I think we have to go back to a conversation you and I had about 3 years ago. I remember, and it was about New York State. That's his Achilles heel. It always has been. It wasn't Mueller. It wasn't the first impeachment because there was no conviction. It's New York State. And what will happen to him afterwards with the Trump business and, in fact, with Ivanka and his son-in-law and sons with the Trump business.
Right.
Now, in order for that to happen, he has to resign. Then Pence has to pardon him. He can't pardon himself. If he pardons himself, I promise you, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I did enough research today and also listened to a really good constitutional lawyer. If he pardons himself, it won't hold up.
I can't imagine that it would.
You can't do it in a case involving yourself. So he would have to resign and let Pence do it. Now, here's the problem. Right now, he's got Pence actually making, public statements, going to to defy him and going to Biden's inauguration. And Biden welcomed Pence, said he would be honored to have him there. So, he might resign, and then Pence doesn't pardon him.
Now,
which
that
would be interesting.
That would be fitting.
Yes, that would be.
Because look, as we speak, his most ardent supporters are turning on him. We're seeing some of the
right.
extreme right wingers now, looking at him and about ready to throw him under the bus.
Right, and should things have been done? Should he have been fought earlier? Sure, but when people say, "Well, they're just doing it to protect themselves," I honestly. For most of them, not all of them, they're doing it because they are absolutely, totally disgusted. Some of these people, it's not going to affect their future career. They're disgusted with what happened. I think the death of the Capitol Hill police officer, frankly, Rick, not just beyond what happened in the Capitol, but the death of the Capitol police officer, I think, really, threw this to another level.
No, I agree, but I'm sorry. You don't get to dance with the devil and save your soul. I know you may have these folks may have this grand epiphany, and the death of that police officer may be at the center of it, but you don't get to dance with the devil.
Well, I understand what you're saying. And Holly is the best example.
Yep.
If they had said what the late Stephanie Tubbs Jones said when she protested the Ohio vote, when I asked for the Ohio vote back in 2005. Stephanie Tubbs Jones said, "I'm not trying to overturn an election. I want to point out election irregularities." Had they taken that same tone, said the same things, there wouldn't have been the ability to have this land on them. That's not what Hawley was after. He was after the overturning of an election, and he gave these people, as the president did, all this inspiration. They could actually go down there and force, Pence to take control or force an outcome there, which was never going to happen.
No, and there's part of me that keeps coming back to this moment. I saw the story today that Sidney Powell is being sued by Dominion Voting Systems for her what she said about their stuff because it's not true. I'm waiting for all of the Giulianis and the Sidney Powells and the Ellises and all of these people who put this kangaroo court on here where I live in just outside of Gettysburg, in Michigan, in Arizona, and went all in Georgia, went all across the country with this basically BS tour, and lied constantly and repetitively and sought people to come and perjure themselves because they weren't under oath, so that they could get these people who are, the dim among us, all wired up and fired up to load up their guns and go to Washington, D.C. and do what they did. I think we have to hold them accountable just as much as those people who went into the Capitol.
Well, absolutely. And, to pinpoint just one person first, if Giuliani is not put into a federal cell somewhere, and I'm not talking about witness protection, I'm talking about a prison, then justice and the law are a million miles apart. If anybody in this entire country has ever violated multiple laws for all the horrible reasons, it's Rudy Giuliani, above all of them.
Yeah, no, I mean it's disgraceful, and like I said, Wednesday I was angry. I haven't been that angry and that worked up since 9/11. Now I want to make sure that we weed all of this out and we follow the money and we hold them accountable, because just as responsible for what happened on Wednesday as the people who did it are the people who funded it and worked these people up into a lather, and this whole movement of billionaire cash that's funded groups like Freedom Works and Americans for Prosperity and all of these state policy networks who have been sending out this, frothing at the mouth kind of rabid red meat for these people to consume. They need to be held accountable as well.
Mm-hmm. And the way it can be done is not, honestly, not some congressional dog and pony show that people pontificate for X amount of time for a few days, but they really need to do something in the area of the research of all the facts and all these things that have occurred. It can be done through the Justice Department. It could be done through Congressional Investigation Committee, and then you spill out the facts and somebody goes with it. I've said 100 times that one of my biggest disappointments is that somebody, I don't care which Democrat-controlled Congress or Republican-controlled Congress, or White House, somebody would find those people that stood in front of us, looked us in the eye and said, here's what's going on in Iraq. You need to give the president full faith and authority. Nothing ever happened to those people,
Yeah, I mean,
they lied, people died.
And that's the other part of this. No, I mean, and I know this, every time I talk to you, I know this weighs on you.
Yes,
I know this is one of those things that you're in your time in Congress. This is that one thing that sticks out more than anything that happened or you did. This weighs on your soul, and I get that. And I am with you. We need to have transparency and accountability in this moment and that.
Right. It took me a long time before I could even rationally even talk about it, because I was so irrational about it. It's something that's bugged me. People say, well, what's the worst thing ever happened in your life? Was it Abramoff? And I said, no, the worst thing was that. And the fact that, these people stood there and lied and got away with it. And so history will repeat itself. But I understand what you're saying, with what happened, the horrible thing that happened and what's been happening. This was the match that lit it. And if it just sits there and everybody says, well, we're just gonna move on, somebody's got to be held accountable.
Yeah,
this was a catastrophic nightmare.
The sad thing is, Bob, and I look at this and I take the moment that you're talking about in this moment, and I believe that they're linked. They are the same vein running through our heart and soul that is blackening our heart and soul. That has to be dealt with. It's that moneyed interest, that huge corporate money, that war machine money that keeps us divided. It's that kind of frame that keeps us pitted against one another and willing to go into the streets and shed blood like we saw on Wednesday.
Right, and when you don't do something about it, I'll give you the perfect example. When you don't do something about a John Bolton, they go on to come back, as he did once again, into an administration. He was part of that whole deal, one big part of that whole deal with Iraq. So, if you don't do something about it, those people live, they linger, and guess what? Sometimes they return.
Yeah, which is why I've said and you know me, I don't go. I'm not radical. I'm not one on the radical fringe. I say Trump has to be impeached. I know Joe Biden has said he has no appetite for it, and as you pointed out, it's going to take probably into his term. But I'm of the mindset, even if it's at 11:59 on January 20th, there has to be consequences, so that in this nation we can at least look ourselves in the face in the mirror and go, if you break the law, if you do this, you will be held accountable, no matter who you are.
Right, and like I said, they cloud the issue if they bring up impeachment and they don't actually do it. If they're going to bring it up and they can do it really instantly, and nobody can really say, well, we don't know all the facts of what was on a phone call. Well, we know. We know what happened. We know who incited. We know that. And then again, the Senate doesn't have to act legally until Schumer would come into it.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I said earlier today, and hours ago, I said, don't threaten impeachment. And to steal a tagline from Nike, just do it, or better yet, just effing do it. I believe it should have been done at 4:01 a.m. on Thursday morning, the minute after they certified Joe Biden, the election for Joe Biden. You get to work on that. You get him out that day.
Mm-hmm. Because again, they all knew nothing could happen.
Right.
But the president stood there and said, Pence is the last. I mean, talk about throwing somebody under the bus. Pence is the last choice. He can do something about it. And then afterwards, he publicly said how disappointed, even after all that happened at the Capitol, he said how he was so disappointed in Pence.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
He didn't do his duty.
So how does Pence come out of this? Because I'm saying Pence is a coward. Pence should be out in front going, look, this is too far for the good of the nation. We need to invoke the 25th Amendment. We can't have this. We can't have this guy sitting in the White House. This is too divisive. Or am I allowing my anger and my emotion to get away with?
No, I think with Pence, I think people are looking at Pence now after what Biden said. I would welcome him. It would be an honor to have him, etc. I think people are looking at Pence probably with more on the sympathy realm, in the sense of he's in there with somebody that's out of complete control. But Pence he could actually make a public statement that would basically force the cabinet, at least 11 people, to invoke the 25th if he made a public statement. Now, his political career, for what it's worth, is gone, obviously, over this. But he could say something, and then that would create the entire argument immediately publicly about the 25th Amendment.
Right. I mean, his career is over no matter what. No matter what he does, it's over.
Right.
So why not go down in history as the guy who did the right thing?
Mm-hmm. He could. I don't know if he will. Although one thing that we can't predict, did all of this, stop the president? He came out and talked about, these heinous acts and these people should be prosecuted, and what happened at the Capitol. But of course, he called them good people. He finally got pressured a day later, to say those types of things. So a lot of people say, well, he's quiet now, he's alone, which he is. He's alone. But you don't know what he is going to come up with, in the next day or the next day. Who's going to expose it if it's something that we all say, you've got to be kidding me, and then it forces action on the 25th or impeachment? Who's going to expose it? Let's hope, that if something really wild again occurs, that Pence would expose it.
Yeah,
if he's even allowed in the White House.
Yeah. No, I mean, Trump himself has said on Monday, he's our great vice president, but I won't like him as much if he doesn't do what I want him to do, which is, basically throw our entire history under the bus. Mm-hmm. But you got to imagine not really liking him very much right now.
Well, can you imagine if Pence would have actually tried to do something? I mean, it'd be just like, outrageous.
Now, know Mike Pence. I mean, you served in Congress with him.
Sure.
Is this the guy? Is this the guy you knew?
Well, I knew he would not do what Trump wanted, but I'm just surprised that, he was head of what we now call the Freedom Caucus,
right.
principle no matter what. He took me on the floor on the budget of the House. He took me directly on and tried to stop my proposal for the budget to run the House on the basis of of the right thing to do in his mind. So I would say that the Pence from those days would have done, no matter what the problem or the perception or the outcome, would have done what he thought was right to do. But he's now the Pence that's still under the thumb of the President of the United States and in the White House.
Yeah. So last question I've got for you, because you look at this. If they do the impeachment route Monday, which is there's talk that that's going to happen, how quickly can this run through the House, and then how quickly could it get through the Senate if there was? Because there's talk of Lisa Murkowski becoming leaving the Republican Party if Trump doesn't resign and they don't get their stuff together. I think possibly you could get to enough votes in the Senate if that would happen. How quickly could this happen?
It can happen in the House in a day, because what you do is you don't go through the committee process. You throw it straight to the floor of exactly what they're talking about, what he did, and it could happen in a day. Now, given that scenario and given President Trump and the way he thinks, let's say hypothetically that the president says something that gets out that is threatening in nature, that, well, if they think they're going to do that, I'm going to do this, or bring me the codes. If something like that happened, there would be enough Republicans that would turn, and it could happen with the existing Senate. The pressure would be overwhelming to then immediately do something. I'm talking within hours.
Okay.
Within hours, it could be done in both chambers.
So conceivably, Monday, Tuesday, he could be gone.
He could be gone, and again, it would depend on, once the House would move, it would depend on what's actually said or what somebody says they heard him say in the White House. And I'm saying that because he could react with, if you do this to me, I'm going to do this. And if he would do something like that, that would topple it over the line to where I would have to believe that Lisa Murkowski would not be the only one. You'd have Mitt Romney and a few others that might say, okay, that's it, we need to do something tonight. That's a possible scenario.
Yeah, because here's my problem. We still have aircraft carriers looking at Iran. He's still got a bug up his behind over Iran, and I fear at any moment we could end up in some conflict just because, hey, I'm going out the door. And I know that's probably a scenario that couldn't happen, but maybe it could.
Well, it could. Look, there were airplanes within 10 minutes of striking Iran. Remember that. John Bolton talked him into doing that. He turned the planes around. I think probably, honestly, his daughter is the only one that has enough influence, and he turned the planes around 10 minutes before. So we came that close. And also, this would be a great time for Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia, who, by the way, remember those explosions on the ships that, quote, the Iranians did to the Saudis?
Right.
That kind of evaporated, didn't it?
Yeah.
All it would take was a Mohammed bin Salman to stage something that Iran did. I mean, after all, he chopped a reporter apart, didn't he? He could stage something and then give the legitimate ability for the president to strike Iran.
Yeah, we can't wait 13 days to have have leadership in the White House. 12 days. We cannot wait until the 20th. Right now, we're kind of just floating in the wind. And as a nation, we're. I guess I pose this as a question. I know I said last question a second ago, but let me pose it this way: how insecure are we as a country? How much danger are we in, given the fact that we are where we are?
I have talked to friends of mine today that are very rational people. That most of them were pro-Trump till last week, and they are sitting there worried that something horrific is going to happen. Just as I personally am as a citizen of this country, I don't buy into a bunch of conspiracies or get alarmed in general about things. I'm very, very uneasy, as many people are out there. Many.
It's
uneasy.
The 20th cannot come quick enough, in my view. But Bob, as always, I appreciate the time, my friend. Look forward to talking to you again.
You too. Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. former Ohio congressman, political analyst, and one of the sanest guys I know. I mean, when he says worry, worry. It's that simple. On Wednesday, when he came and he said, "This is sedition," you listen to that. This is a dangerous time. To have nothing there's no one at the wheel. That's scary. But we're going to pick up. We're going to move forward, and we're going to hold him accountable. So I suggest call your representatives early, call them often, call your senators, especially if you're in a red state, and tell them he has to go, and he has to go on Monday. We cannot go another day, another hour, another minute with Donald Trump in the White House. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.